Good evening, my dear brothers and sisters. I am very pleased to welcome you all for our 7th webinar, Difficult to Control Hypertension. Today, we have got two international speakers, faculty members, panelists. And tomorrow we have hypertensive disorders in pregnancy, where there will be a lot of obstetricians will be participating. The president of FOGSI, one of the leading members of FOGSI, Dr. Ramani, who happens to be wife of Chenniyappan, she is also going to be there, and Mandakini, Nandita. So 4 of them will be there on the tomorrow's program. Then next week we have hypertensive trials which change the practice. The last program is the Conquering the Silent Killer, Hypertension Clinics and the Concept of Hypertensionology. Of course, Chenniyappan needs no introduction. He is our master batsman who is going to play today in a superb form. Any bouncers you can put, he will convert all of them into sixes. So be ready to bowl bouncers or whatever you want. Then, of course, Rajshekhar is our treasurer. He is also going to be our panel member. And I'm very happy to welcome and introduce Dr. Nazmul Hasan. He's a professor of medicine, Popular Medical College, Dhaka. He is the governor of ACP chapter, Bangladesh. He is also past president, Bangladesh Society of Medicine. Just like our API, they have Bangladesh Society of Medicine. He is the past president. And another interesting personality today is Dr. Limpira Guevara. He is an internist and cardiologist. He is the chair of Department of Cardiology, Jose Vargas School of Medicine of the Central University of Venezuela. He is the Secretary of Education of the Venezuelan Society of Cardiology. His practice in Caracas, Venezuela. Both of them are a very interesting personalities, my good friends. Now, I'll go to the topic. As usual, I will set the tone, the context of the topic today. Hypertension is a quadruple paradox. Why I say it's a paradox? Hypertension is so easy to diagnose, but often remains undetected. That's one paradox. Easy to diagnose, but remains undetected. Simple to treat, but often remains untreated. Third paradox, despite availability of potent drugs, but often treatment is ineffective. The last one, which is very passionate to me, in spite of the incidence of morbidity, mortality, more than diabetes, only few specialists are there and few people are focusing and few people are passionate about treating hypertension as a unique subject. So my paradox, the fourth paradox, please concentrate and we will change this paradox into normalcy. History is very important in hypertension. We already mentioned, and Chenniyappan had given a detailed talk. I just give an anecdote to start the difficulty hypertension. A 55-year-old lady came to me. After 3 drugs also, his BP was not under control. When I went through the history, she's a vegetarian. She's fond of pickles, pickles. So pickles is full of salt, and she used to take pickles morning, evening and night and all that. Then when I interrogated more, she used to have a sinus trouble and then she used to take nasal congestion. So these 2 things were the notorious things. So when we stopped those, the BP was better. So why I'm saying this, history and clinical examination is very, very important. The other thing is poor adherence is one of the most important cause of difficulty in treating hypertension. But WHO says adherence is different from compliance. I think Dr. Chenniyappan is going to talk to you about what is adherence, what is compliance. There is one more word called concordance. The shared decision-making process via which patients and clinicians make treatment decision together is known as concordance. It is a multidimensional phenomena determined by interplay of 5 factors. One is socio-economic related factors, healthcare team related factors, and then condition related factors, therapy related factors, and patient-related factors. So improving concordance represents both an important potential source of health and economic advancement. Now, Chennappan is going to talk about difficulty as an individual, what you should do. But I'm a public health man. So my public health point of view, even the control of hypertension in many countries is not that good. Only Canada has got about 60 to 70. I don't know what about Venezuela and what about Bangladesh. In India, we have only 15% under control. And WHO has introduced a module called HEARTS module, HEARTS. What do you mean by that? Healthy lifestyle counseling, E for evidence-based treatment protocol, A for access to essential medications and medicines and technology, R for risk-based management, T for team-based care, and S for systems for monitoring. So WHO introduced this HEARTS. And in hypertension, essential treatment components are protocols, community-based treatment, medication supply, patient-centered care, and information system. These 5 are important to make the system workable to control the hypertension, to reduce the burden. So this is the policy statement from the World Hypertension League, recommended treatment protocols to improve management of hypertension globally. This statement, we had talked in Japan, we had talked in Bangladesh, we had talked in China. So this is a very good simplified protocol which helps in adherence. Of course, the measurement of accurate BP is necessary for screening as well as diagnosis as well as monitoring. So correct BP is necessary for screening also, diagnosis also, and monitoring also. Use a validated instrument with right technique to measure BP. Chennappan is going to talk about that also in his talk. And home blood pressure monitoring is definitely helpful in the control or management of hypertension. So please promote home blood pressure monitoring. So we have WhatsApp Institute of Medical Science in our ACP. We have got 3 WhatsApp groups for hypertension hits. My guests today from Venezuela and Bangladesh, I invite them to join our 3 WhatsApp groups on hypertension. We have got 2 clinical imaging groups and 2 ECG groups for us to learn daily, put our questions and clarify from experts. And all the junior doctors also are very actively involved. They learn through our Institute of Medical Science. So we call it as WhatsApp Institute of Medical Science. We talk only about subject, no greeting, no invitations, etc. So now, of course, all of you are familiar with Kahoot. So be ready. Today also we are going to play. And each question we are not giving 30 seconds, only 20 seconds, because everybody is now aware. So after Chennappan's talk, 10 questions, 20 seconds means 200 seconds. That is 3 minutes only. So with this, I request our Chennappan to present his talk. Believe me, today is going to be a master batsman, and all the difficulty what you are facing in difficulty in treatment in hypertension, he'll make it very easy for every one of you. Please listen, enjoy his scientific piece. Over to Chennappan. Please welcome Chennappan.
Good evening, Dr. Murunathan, sir. Is the slide is okay, sir? Slide is okay? Yes. So good evening, Dr. Murunathan, sir. Good evening, the respected faculty from India as well as from abroad. So Dr. Murunathan has given me a talk on difficult to control hypertension. Difficult to control hypertension is not only for the difficulty for hypertension, but it is also difficulty for the speaker to speak on the subject. So as Dr. Murunathan requested, don't bowl any bouncers to me because I am not a very great brassman to deal with the bouncers. So Dr. Murunathan already talked to you about the hypertension paradox, and this is a prestigious Shattuck lecture in New England Journal of Medicine a few years ago. It said that in spite of so much advances happening in understanding hypertension, investigating hypertension, and in the treatment of hypertension, we have higher increase in population where we have uncontrolled blood pressure. So in spite of advances, we have not won the dreaded disease of hypertension. So that is a paradox. So now we come to the definitions, which is a terminology maze. So first of all, we must know what is the target blood pressure we are going to achieve. So this is from the International Society Hypertension Guideline from 2020. So less than 65 years, the BP target is less than 130/80 if tolerated, but not less than 120/70. The patient is above 65 years, BP target should be less than 140/90 if tolerated. Of course, you have to consider many other aspects to achieve an intensive BP control. At least, if you are not able to achieve this, at least the basic requirement is you have to reduce the systolic 20 millimeters of mercury and diastolic 10 millimeters of mercury from the baseline blood pressure. So that is a basic requirement. So this is our target blood pressure, and this target blood pressure should be achieved within 3 months of starting antihypertensive medication. And of course, any difficulty in achieving this blood pressure goal or this target is difficult to control hypertension. So what is terminology maze? We are having uncontrolled hypertension as a terminology, apparent resistant hypertension, pseudo-resistant hypertension, true resistant hypertension, controlled resistant hypertension, and refractory hypertension. Any BP which is out of target when you are using 1, 2, or 3 drugs is uncontrolled hypertension. Difficult to control hypertension is a broad terminology which includes all these aspects of different types of blood pressure control. So any BP which is out of target with 1, 2, or 3 drugs is uncontrolled hypertension. Apparent resistant hypertension is defined as the blood pressure that remains above target in spite of concurrent use of 3 antihypertensive drugs, which includes a diuretic at the optimal or at the maximum tolerated dose or maximum therapeutic dose. In spite of this, if the BP is not at target, it is apparent resistant hypertension. Once you rule out in apparent resistant hypertension can be pseudo resistance or true resistance. In apparent resistant hypertension, if you rule out pseudo resistant causes, it becomes true resistant hypertension. Even if you get normal blood pressure by using 4 drugs, although your blood pressure is at target, but you have to use 4 drugs to get the target, then it is called controlled resistant hypertension. What is refractory hypertension? Refractory hypertension and resistant hypertension are not same. So refractory hypertension is the one where you have inability to achieve the blood pressure control in spite of using at least 5 antihypertensive drugs, which include chlorthalidone as well as spironolactone. The patients with refractory hypertension constitute approximately 3% of those people who have uncontrolled resistant hypertension. So we can put everything in one slide. So if you use difficult to control hypertension, it's a broad terminology. If you use 1, 2, or 3 drugs, BP is not at target, it becomes uncontrolled hypertension. Then you look at the 3 drugs at optimal dosing, which includes a diuretic. In spite of that, if the BP is not at target, it becomes apparent resistant hypertension. This means it can be pseudo resistance or true resistance. If you rule out pseudo resistant causes, then it becomes a true resistant hypertension. So if you are able to achieve the target by 4 drugs, it is called controlled true resistant hypertension. The BP is not at target after using equal or more than 5 drugs, then it becomes refractory hypertension. So these are the subsets of difficult to control hypertension. So if you look at the prevalence of resistant hypertension, it may be 1/5 of the total hypertensive population. In this resistant hypertension, 65% are likely to have controlled resistant hypertension, which means their blood pressure is at target, but they are using 4 drugs. So 32% of them will have uncontrolled resistant hypertension in spite of using 3 or more drugs. But 3% of them will have refractory hypertension, by which we mean equal to or more than 5 drugs are used, the blood pressure is not at target. So this is the prevalence of the difficult to control hypertension. Then why should we bother about apparent resistant hypertension, which includes pseudo resistance as well as true resistance? The most frequent and dangerous complication of this apparent resistant hypertension is heart failure, followed by cardiovascular mortality, then the ischemic heart disease, all-cause mortality, as well as TIAs. So this increase in complications are after adjusting all the other risk factors, all the other conventional risk factors, which means just an apparent resistant hypertension is an independent risk factor to increase all these complications of the hypertension. So having seen the definitions, now we come to the two aspects of apparent resistant hypertension. First, we look at pseudo-resistant hypertension. The pseudo-resistant causes may include the doctor, that is we, patient, as well as the drugs. So first we look at the doctors. So many times we have seen this slide and many times you have talked about how to accurately measure the blood pressure. Patient seated calmly for 5 minutes, empty bladder, no cigarette or coffee, back supported, legs grounded, uncrossed, do not speak or do not listen, use the correct blood pressure width and correct blood pressure, the width and the height of the blood pressure cuff should be normal, 3 centimeters above the elbow, and the mid-arm at the heart level, be seated, and 3 readings, and you have to take 3 readings, and the average of last 2 readings should be taken as the blood pressure for the patient. So the first and most important factor as a pseudo-resistant cause of the apparent resistant hypertension is inaccurate technique, inaccurate measurement of blood pressure. The second is, especially in elderly, when you have a high systolic pressure, you must always rule out what is known as the hardening of the arteries. For that, Osler's maneuver is done, where you put the blood pressure cuff and elevate the blood pressure above the systolic pressure. Then when you palpate the brachial artery or the radial artery, it should be collapsed because there is no flow. If the artery is thickened, you will feel this as a cord or a nerve. So if you feel the artery, in spite of increasing the blood pressure above systolic, it means it is hardened artery. That means you have to exert more pressure by your cuff to compress a hardened artery rather than increase in intraluminal pressure. So this becomes pseudo-systolic hypertension, and the maneuver is called Osler's maneuver. So any high isolated systolic hypertension in elderly, perform Osler's maneuver to rule out pseudo-systolic hypertension. Then the most important cause is physician's inertia. So when you look at this slide, although we have said in many of the subsets, 130 systolic is our goal, when the blood pressure is above this target, like 140 to 150, only 23% of physicians are intensifying the treatment to get the target of 130. So we always accept 140 or 150 as normal and continue the same drugs in the same dosage. So this is called physician's inertia. Even the systolic pressure is above 180, only 45% of physicians intensify the treatment on hypertension. So you have to get out of this inertia. What are the causes of this inertia? Why the caregiver is not acting to get the target blood pressure? The doctor may have a different focus. He may be more worried about diabetes rather than hypertension. Lack of knowledge about targets. He may not believe the evidence. Because of the fear of side effects, the age, and serious comorbidity, he may not increase the drugs. And of course, the organization in which he is working may also influence his decision on intensifying therapy. So these are the causes of physician's inertia. We have to get out of this physician inertia and try to get target blood pressure in many of our patients. Okay, then we come to the patient-related issues. We prescribe a drug. Let us see how many percentage of our patients are taking this drug after 1 year. We can see in this study, after 1 year, only 38% are taking diuretics, 43% are taking beta blockers. Even the best tolerated antihypertensives like receptor blockers are taken only by 64% of patients. Of to 2/3 of our patients only take at least 70% of prescribed antihypertensive medicine. So many times your excellent antihypertensive medicines are on the prescription, but not in the patient's stomach. So that is the most important thing of pseudo-resistant causes. The patient, just like Dr. Muruganathan told, that the non-adherence or the non-compliance. Who are the people or who are the patients who are likely to be non-compliant? Male gender, young patients, patients relatively having a lower limits of blood pressure, the low-income countries, low-income socioeconomic groups are the ones who are likely to have a non-compliance. Surprisingly, diabetic patients likely to be more compliant. They are very good in taking the antihypertensive drugs. This interesting study of more than 5,000 patients tell us that the first prescription never purchased by the patient in 1% and 14% discontinued the medicines after the first prescription. So as a result, at the end of 2 years, 35 to 40% of our patients are not taking the medicines we have prescribed for hypertension. So this is the most important cause of the pseudo-resistance. Then we come to the drug-related causes, which can be remembered by 7 I's. Improper selection of the drug. So we have told you in the last class how to select the drugs in different situations. You give inadequate doses. We already told you what are the improper combinations and improper timing of medicine. You give a diuretic at 10 p.m. in the night. So you know what will be the patient's fate. So inadequate absorption. So you must know which drug is absorbed in empty stomach, which drug is absorbed in after food and so on. Pharmacokinetics is important to make the drug to be absorbed. The drug's inability to give 24 hours protection and intolerable side effects are 7 I's of the drug-related causes. The other important cause of pseudo-resistance is white coat hypertension, where clinical blood pressure is high, home blood pressure is normal. It constitutes, so that's the importance of home blood pressure monitoring, as Dr. Muruganathan told you, very, very important. So 15 to 30% of general population, more common in elderly and pregnant. So this prognosis is in between normal pressure versus the sustained pressure. Some patients may turn into hypertensives in future. Even if you change your clothes like this, still even you get rid of the white coat and come like this, even then the patient may be afraid of you. So when to treat white coat hypertension? Only when there are other risk factors as well as when there is an organ damage. So we have two types of the blood pressures which can be diagnosed only by home blood pressure monitoring or 24 hours BP monitoring. So when we look at the BP at clinic and the BP at home and working place, if everything is normal with no target organ disease, is normotension. When everything is abnormal and target organ disease is present, it is true hypertension or sustained hypertension. When the blood pressure is high in clinic and home and working place blood pressure is normal, it is white coat hypertension. Here, the target organ disease may be absent. The patient may be coming to you for 10 years. Consistently, his pressure may be 160/100, but never he had a left ventricular hypertrophy, albuminuria, or a retinopathy. So that is white coat. Then the most often missed hypertension is masked hypertension, where the clinic blood pressure is normal, home or working blood pressure is high. So most often this blood pressure is missed unless we are very careful to look for the target organ disease. Consistently, the patient's blood pressure is normal in clinic, but he's got unexplained LVH. He has got unexplained hypertensive retinopathy, or he's got albumin in the urine. Then only you can suspect masked hypertension. So 24 hours ambulatory BP monitoring and home BP monitoring are needed to diagnose the white coat hypertension, which is once again a very important cause of pseudo-resistant hypertension. So improper BP measurement, missing pseudo-systolic hypertension, and physician inertia as the factors by the doctor, pseudo-resistant causes by the doctor. Then of course, lot of things about the patient's adherence and compliance. And as far as the drugs, we have told you about 7 I's, which constitute the pseudo-resistant hypertension. Having ruled out all these causes, still the blood pressure is high, then it becomes true resistant hypertension. The true resistant hypertension can have specific causes and also the secondary causes. Elderly age is itself. So what are the population or what are the patients group which are likely to have resistant hypertension? In the first visit itself, you can imagine that this patient is likely to have in future resistant hypertension. First thing is the age. Because of aortic stiffness, risk factors and comorbid condition. So elderly patients are likely to have resistant hypertension. As you can see, the elderly patient, like us, every morning we wake up, we understand we have another chance. The first time visit itself, the patient has got very high blood pressure. This patient is likely to have resistant hypertension. Then the obesity, especially mid-segment obesity. Today we imagine the adipocyte is not a godown of fat. It is a factory synthesizing so many substances, and the only good substance is adiponectin. So in a mid-segment obesity, the adiponectin is less, and T regulatory cells, lipid metabolites, the neurohormonal system, inflammation. So the obesity itself can produce hypertension. And in pathophysiology, I have told you many mechanisms by which insulin resistance can cause hypertension, and it can also produce significant endothelial dysfunction resulting in decreased nitric oxide, which can produce hypertension. So the obesity can act on the kidney by producing many pathological abnormalities like podocyte injury, fibrosis, expansion, proteinuria, abnormal feedback, and decreased pressure natriuresis. It can cause and also the effect of hypertension. So the obese people, especially the mid-segment obese people, are likely to develop resistant hypertension. Then high salt intake will be one of the factors which will predispose to resistant hypertension. We all imagine the high salt diet is going to produce major hemodynamic effects such as increased sympathetic system activity, cardiac output, and increased peripheral vascular resistance. But what we do not concentrate is it has got a significant effect on immune system by increasing the Tregs, T regulatory cells in the macrophages. It can produce significant increase in inflammation, and which can further produce endothelial dysfunction, abnormal sympathetic activity, and impairment in pressure natriuresis, which may result in resistant hypertension. Chronic kidney disease is very important factor of resistant hypertension by 2 modes of action. The retention of urea and nitrogen can produce an endothelial damage, increase sympathetic tone, and can produce increased bone and mineral disorders. So because of that, the endothelial dysfunction, increase in vasoconstrictors, as well as increase in sympathetic system, there is a significant decrease in vascular diameter because of the spasm. In addition to activation of renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, the vessel diameter comes down because of the smooth muscle hypertrophy as well as the spasm. Because of the calcification of the vessel wall, the vessel becomes more stiff, constituting systolic hypertension. Because of the aldosterone, as well as the nephron loss and sodium retention, and also due to ischemia of kidney damage, there's a significant increase in preload, which increases the cardiac output. So all the mechanisms, increase in preload and increase in the peripheral resistance by means of decreasing the diameter of the vessels and also increasing the stiffness of the vessels, the chronic kidney disease predisposed to resistant hypertension. Diabetes, once again, may predispose to resistant hypertension. There are 4 mechanisms by which diabetes can produce hypertension. One is through the diabetic nephropathy, as we have seen in the previous slide. Second, we have told you many mechanisms of insulin resistance. The most forgotten fact is volume expansion in patients with diabetes mellitus. And of course, as Dr. Muruganathan said, blood vessel changes. Diabetes can affect all the 3 types of vessels. One is a cushion artery, which is an aorta. Because of the aortic elastin degeneration, the cushion artery becomes stiff, and the presence of advanced glycation products in this cushion artery or the medial layer of this cushion artery produces significant stiffening of the aorta, which is arteriosclerosis and can predispose to resistant isolated systolic hypertension. Then it can affect the conduit arteries, like your arteries which supply the organs like the heart, brain, kidney, and the gut. And it is the disease of intima. So this is going to produce atherosclerosis, going to increase the peripheral resistance and can produce organ ischemia. The microvasculature is also involved in diabetes, so which can produce significant increase in peripheral resistance and diastolic pressure and organ ischemia. So thereby, the diabetes can predispose to resistant hypertension. Left ventricular hypertrophy is going to be the cause and effect of resistant hypertension. We all know that the resistant hypertension can produce significant left ventricular hypertrophy, but the stiff left ventricle is going to increase significantly the left atrial pressure. The increase in left atrial pressure is going to stimulate all your neurohormonal systems, such as renin-angiotensin system and sympathetic system, which is going to further elevate your blood pressure, making the patient to go for a resistant hypertension. Many women are difficult to understand, and hypertension in women is also difficult to understand and treat. So they have women-specific risk factors, such as premature menopause, the delivery weight gain, gestational diabetes mellitus, preeclampsia, premature delivery, intrauterine growth retardation, and also all these things can predispose a patient, which are called adverse pregnancy outcomes, can predispose the patient for a future endothelial dysfunction. And there are specific mechanisms, particularly for women, especially obese women, or the increased production of aldosterone and the increased response of the receptor to aldosterone and increased androgen levels and aberrant estrogen signaling also contribute to hypertension. As far as the obstructive sleep apnea is concerned, there's a different clinical manifestation for the females. They will have more insomnia, depression, and restless leg syndrome. What is very important to realize is, even CPAP therapy in women may not work equally like men. So now we have seen what are the patient characteristic factors which can produce resistant hypertension. The age, high baseline blood pressure, obesity, salt, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, left ventricular hypertrophy, and female sex. So at the first visit itself, if the patient has got any one of them, you can expect that this patient is likely to go for resistant hypertension. Then we come to the secondary causes. Throughout these webinars, we have used these mnemonics like CROPT to know about the secondary hypertension. The chronic kidney disease we have already seen, the renovascular disease, obstructive sleep apnea, primary hyperaldosteronism, ethanol, and drugs. So these are the common secondary causes which can predispose to resistant hypertension. Coming to obstructive sleep apnea, we have seen all that. So hypoxia, hypercapnia, intermittent arousals, and large intrathoracic pressure swings can significantly increase sympathetic overdrive, as well as renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, which can not only produce vasoconstriction to increase afterload, they can significantly retain fluid to increase the preload to produce resistant hypertension. In addition to that, the shifting of the fluid from the legs to the upper part of the body can significantly produce edema of the upper airways and can once again predispose to obstructive sleep apnea. So this becomes a vicious circle in obstructive sleep apnea, where the fluid retention is not only contribute to resistant hypertension, it can also contribute to further narrowing of the upper airway during sleep. So what are the tests we are supposed to do in resistant hypertension? The most important test is going to be home blood pressure monitoring or ambulatory blood pressure monitoring to rule out white coat hypertension and so on. Echocardiogram and electrocardiogram to diagnose left ventricular hypertrophy, left ventricular dysfunction, diastolic and systolic. Complete blood count for anemia, and of course, the glucose, urea, creatinine, electrolytes, and the calculation of EGFR. Lipids, we have talked at length about the urine analysis in our investigations. Aldosterone, sodium, and albumin excretion, and aldosterone concentration and renin for hyperaldosteronism, thyroid, the renal ultrasound, renal artery Doppler. So these are some of the basic investigations to look at the causes, not only the specific causes, but also the secondary causes. As far as the secondary causes is concerned, I just want to tell you one or two clinical pointers, one basic investigation, so that you can remember them easily. Because when you go through the books of the secondary hypertension, there's a large tabular columns with lot of things, so you may not remember anything. So as far as the CKD is concerned, whenever you have a normocytic normochromic anemia, which is refractory, and the descending edema, in renal failure, edema descends down from face, whereas in heart failure, the edema ascends from legs. So this is a clue the patient may have a kidney disease, creatinine, EGFR, potassium, ultrasound kidney, basic investigation. Renal artery stenosis in young hypertensives, you must always suspect renal artery stenosis. In elderly, atherosclerotic renal artery stenosis may be suspected. There are recurrent episodes of flash acute pulmonary edema because of heart failure with a preserved ejection fraction, sudden out of control blood pressure, sudden increase in creatinine after using ACE inhibitor and ARB are the clues that the patient may have atherosclerotic renal artery stenosis, renal artery Doppler, or MR angiogram. Three important signs of obstructive sleep apnea are the important complaints of the obstructive sleep apnea, apart from the recurrent apneas and arousals in the night, are daytime sleepiness, nocturia, and early morning headache. Three important symptoms of obstructive sleep apnea. Polysomnography is the basic investigation. Primary hyperaldosteronism, muscle weakness, unprovoked hypokalemia, or after using a diuretic, you have a severe hypokalemia. Suspect primary hyperaldosteronism. One test is plasma aldosterone renin ratio. Aortic coarctation in the young patient having a claudication, always we have to examine the pulse in the lower limbs for diagnosing coarctation. Echocardiogram, aortogram, and MR angiogram. Pheochromocytoma, palpitation, sweating, and hypertension. Heart rate, sinus tachycardia with hypertension. And neurofibromatosis type 1 is the general examination finding, which may tell you you may have a pheochromocytoma as the cause of hypertension. One investigation is urinary fractionated metanephrines. Cushing's, the typical external features, and 24 hours urinary free cortisol. Hypothyroidism, bradycardia, constipation, hypertension. Hyperthyroidism, tachycardia, diarrhea, and hypertension. TSH and free T4. Hyperparathyroidism, stones because of the high calcium, groans because of the bony pains, moans because of the acidity and constipation. Parathyroid hormone, calcium, and phosphorus. So having seen the causes of the difficult to control hypertension, to pseudo resistance, as well as true resistance, we come to the management. So what is true resistant hypertension? We are using 3 drugs, including a diuretic, maximum tolerated dose, pseudo resistance is included. The lifestyle modification is very, very important, reinforcing the lifestyle modification, especially the newer, I told you the modern history taking in hypertension. In 1990, the person was thin, the TV was fat. Today, the TV is thin and the patient is fat. So watching TV more than 2.5 hours per day significantly increases the cardiovascular mortality and risk of hypertension. In addition to aerobic training, there is an indication for dynamic resistant exercising 2 to 3 times a week for hypertension. Of course, the tranquility in the form of yoga, meditation, which can be natural or by giving the drugs, the tranquilizers, to make the patient feel relaxed. Of course, the sodium restriction and many of the salt Many of our salt does not come from the food. They come from the fast food. They come from the outside. And of course, the offending drugs, we have to stop. We go to the history of the offending drugs. And of course, we always say the moderate drinking, 1 or 2 standard drink is good for the heart. But when we say to the patient, 1 standard drink or 1 glass of drink, maybe this glass of drink. So moderation is never practiced in our patients. That's why it is better to say to stop alcohol totally and permanently. Management of CKD, the lifestyle advice regarding the lifestyle modification, dietary advice, especially for potassium and phosphate, salt intake, get the blood pressure less than 130/80. Best drugs are ACE inhibitor, ARB, but we have to watch the creatinine increase, and the statins, antiplatelet drugs when they are needed, and avoid non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. As far as the atherosclerotic renal artery stenting is concerned, the presence of the renal artery stenosis is not an indication for a stenting. The clear indications for stenting in atherosclerotic renal artery stenosis are refractory hypertension, progression of renal dysfunction, and recurrent episodes of heart failure, especially flash pulmonary edema due to heart failure with the preserved ejection fraction. So even you stent, it is not sure whether we will get a significant BP response, because what we deal is the vessel outside. Even the intrarenal vessels atherosclerosis may produce significant resistance. So that's why the BP may persist even after stenting in patients with atherosclerotic renal artery stenosis. Obstructive sleep apnea indication for treatment is apnea hypopnea index more than 15 or more. But even when the index is between 5 and 14, the patient has got excessive daytime sleepiness, impaired cognition, and resistant hypertension, you can give a CPAP for the treatment of resistant hypertension, even though the index is between 5 and 14. Of course, the specific reference and specific treatment of the secondary causes of hypertension is necessary if you have diagnosed one. So most often we think primary hypertension and secondary hypertension in isolation. We think that the primary hypertension patient may not have secondary hypertension, and secondary hypertension patient is a purely secondary hypertension patient. But there are certain instances where a primary hypertension patient may have an additional secondary hypertension cause, or in addition to primary hypertension, there is some other secondary cause which is contributing to resistant hypertension. What are those situations? In a well-known primary hypertension patients, if you develop atherosclerotic renal artery stenosis or a thyroid disease, hyperaldosteronism, CKD, and receiving erythropoietin, obstructive sleep apnea, a primary hypertension patient, obstructive sleep apnea, it becomes a secondary cause. New habits, new drugs, increase in abdominal obesity, peripheral vascular disease, a new onset of endocrine disease such as Cushing's or parathyroidism and so on, malignancy and chemotherapy. Of course, today, the COVID. So we talk a little about COVID and hypertension, because any lecture today will not be complete without touching the COVID. So what is COVID in hypertension? COVID can transform a patient from controlled blood pressure to uncontrolled blood pressure, uncontrolled blood pressure to a pseudo-resistant pressure, pseudo-resistant pressure to a resistant pressure, and a refractory hypertension. It is not only for the patient who is afraid of COVID, it is also for the doctor who is afraid of the patient who has got COVID. So in this way, COVID can produce significant change in the pre-existent blood pressure. So how to manage hypertension in COVID? So don't think I'm going to give you a lot of drugs for management of COVID and hypertension. I'm trying to give you, suggest 10 commandments. Don't see TV news channels, see comedy channels. Don't read anything related to COVID in your WhatsApp, Facebook, or Instagram. Skip COVID statistic page in your newspaper daily. Don't keep on expecting COVID to visit you. So daily, don't think you are going to have a COVID. Don't be obsessed with the neighbors and relatives. So a lot of things we see now, especially in the gated communities. People are worried about whom people are in the next door, who are visiting the next door, who are visiting their apartments and so on. That itself increase their blood pressure. Continue your antihypertensives. Routine doctor visit may be avoided. Be happy with a telecommunication or a teleconsultation. Don't check your blood pressure daily. That itself will increase your blood pressure. And of course, practice the most successful tri-vaccine, which is the mask, the correct method of masking. You must try to protect your nose and mouth and not thyroid. And social distancing, and of course, hand washing is a tri-vaccine available to us. If you can't solve a problem, if you can't treat or you cannot control COVID, try to live with the problem, live with the COVID, like spouses. So how will we treat our resistant hypertension? The most important cause of resistant hypertension is volume expansion. So that's why if the patient is on a basic thiazide diuretic, he should be switched over to chlorthalidone or indapamide if eGFR is more than 30 ml. If the eGFR is less than 30, he must be switched over to loop diuretics like torsemide and furosemide, which can be intensified according to the patient's fluid status. Furosemide should be always given twice daily, 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Torsemide once a day. The effective diuretic dose is almost necessary, always necessary to treat resistant hypertension. Then we come to aldosterone. Aldosterone is always, we think, it just retains sodium and water. It can produce potassium loss, magnesium loss, increase the thrombotic material, increase the inflammatory material, reactive oxygen species, and the eGFR can be reduced, endothelial dysfunction, vascular compliance, myocardial fibrosis, vascular remodeling, which can lead on to significant hypertension. It has been shown 1/5 of our patients with resistant hypertension have got primary hyperaldosteronism. That's why the most important drug in resistant hypertension is aldosterone antagonist in the form of spironolactone or eplerenone. If they are not tolerated, amiloride to the dose of 5 to 10 milligram can be used, but first choice is eplerenone, amiodarone. Spironolactone can have significant side effects like gynecomastia. Eplerenone may not have them. Please check serum potassium at least every 2 weeks, especially when the patient has got high level of basic potassium. Who is the ideal? How will you identify the ideal candidate that this patient will respond to this aldosterone antagonist? Is a patient who is on full dose of ACE inhibitor and ARB, but has got borderline hypokalemia. His full dose, but his potassium is around 2.9 or 3 or 3.1. Then you know this patient has got significant hyperaldosteronism. So how will you select the fourth drug? You have used 3 drugs. First is optimized diuretic dose. Switch over to thiazide-like diuretic, use loop diuretic, and add spironolactone if the potassium is less than 4.5. Add a beta blocker if the heart rate is more than 70. If the potassium is more than 4.5 and the heart rate is less than 60, then it should be alpha blocker. If the heart rate is more than 70, in spite of a beta blocker, or you cannot use a beta blocker, then it is clonidine. So if you use any one of these 4 drugs, still the BP is not under control, then next drugs is like the direct vasodilators, like hydralazine and minoxidil. Still the BP is not under control, refer, of course, to your enemy. So we have seen that there are 4 drug options there for the 4th drug. So having used one of them, how to use remaining 3 of them as the 5th drug. So if the heart rate is more than 70, best thing to use a beta blocker, which is likely to be vasodilatory beta blocker like labetalol, carvedilol, or nebivolol. So if the heart rate is more than 70, you can add a beta blocker as the 5th drug if you have used a spironolactone as the 4th drug. And of course, the centrally acting agents like clonidine and moxonidine can be of help in patients who are still hypertensive, especially clonidine in renal resistant hypertension is very good. So this drug can be used as oral preparation or a dermal patch preparation. And the difference between clonidine and moxonidine is that moxonidine may have little less side effects, but its potency is much less than clonidine, and it is contraindicated in heart failure. Please remember, both can produce bradycardia, especially when they are used with beta blockers. The last option is the alpha blocker. You have used the beta blocker, still the BP is under control. Patient especially has got a benign prostatic hypertrophy. Then, of course, the alpha blocker. And of course, the next choice is a direct vasodilators like hydroxyzine and minoxidil. So whenever you use a vasodilator, there is two important disadvantages: increase in reflex sympathetic activity and then increase in fluid retention. So you have to watch for that. And of course, minoxidil is a very good drug for a patient who has got baldness, and it is a very bad drug for a young woman waiting for the marriage. So having used this resistant hypertension, 3 drugs you have used, the pressure is not under control, then it becomes uncontrolled resistant hypertension. You have added the 4th drug and waiting whether this 4th drug is going to work or not. If the 4th drug is working and you have the blood pressure at target, it becomes controlled resistant hypertension. So the 4th drug is not worked and you have added the 5th drug, and in spite of 5 drugs, if you have still the BP is not at target, then it becomes a refractory hypertension. So the difference between the refractory hypertension, as I mentioned, are defined 5 antihypertensive medications, which include clothalidone and spironolactone. And some of the studies have shown the blood pressure of 178/103 in spite of using 6 antihypertensive medications. So the difference between pathophysiology of the resistant and refractory is, here it has been shown the patients with the refractory hypertension has got higher heart rate rather than fluid overload, probably because of increased sympathetic activity. So these are the differences between refractory hypertension and controlled resistant hypertension. All the parameters of increased in sympathetic activity, like heart rate, systolic pressure, diastolic pressure, stiffness, decreased heart rate variability, central aortic pressure, heart rate, and mean blood pressure are all higher for a refractory hypertension. That's why when the patient comes to refractory hypertension, the pathophysiology changes from a fluid overload to a higher sympathetic activity. So you have to step up the beta blockers and clonidine. What is new for resistant hypertension? Firibastat is a drug which is acting on the brain aminopeptidase A and blocking what is known as angiotensin III. And it is going to be useful when it is coming into our practice, wherever the AC inhibitor and ARB are not working. This is especially in Black population and also patients who have got lower in hypertension. After controlling the blood pressure at target, you can definitely de-escalate the drugs. So if it is consistently at target, you can de-escalate. The principle of de-escalation is to reduce or stop BP reducing drugs rather than BP and clinical event reducing drugs. For example, in coronary heart disease, if the patient is on beta blocker, AC inhibitor, and amlodipine, try to de-escalate amlodipine rather than beta blockers and AC inhibitor. In CKD, don't de-escalate ARB and AC inhibitor. Stroke, don't de-escalate amlodipine AC inhibitor. Heart failure, don't de-escalate beta blocker, AC inhibitor, aldosterone antagonist. In diabetes, don't de-escalate AC inhibitor ARB. So try to de-escalate first the only BP reducing drugs rather than clinical event reducing drugs. The most important message is, in order to reduce medicines, don't let the BP to go out of control. Then we come to the device therapy in refractory or resistant hypertension. The renal afferents, because of increased vascular pressure, renal ischemia, and renal artery occlusion, significantly going to increase the efferent signal, efferent sympathetic signals, not only to the kidney producing all ill effects, but also to the neurohormonal system, like renin-angiotensin system, which is going to produce significant increase in preload, significant increase in afterload, significant increase in cardiac output, significant dysregulation of metabolic system. So all these things because of the renal afferent signals. So when you do renal denervation, it denervates efferent nerve fibers as well as afferent nerve fibers. If you block the efferent nerve fibers, renal blood flow is increased, sodium retention is decreased, renin secretion is decreased. If you denervate the afferent fibers, central sympathetic activity is going to be decreased. Although we have a lot of trials which are failures in the previous years, as far as the renal denervation is concerned, we have 2 successful trials now. The 3 trials have reduced the blood pressure and have shown success for renal denervation, and they are projecting a significant cardiovascular benefit because of this BP reduction. But as far as the other device therapies are concerned, cardiac neuromodulation by pacemaker is there. Baroreceptor activation therapy is there with a pacemaker or a stenting or by ablation. Then, of course, denervation with radiofrequency, ultrasound, or alcohol mediated, or central iliac arteriovenous coupler. Of course, all these methods at this point in time is not recommended according to ESC 2018 guidelines. These methods are evolving. So now summary and takeaways, how to make heart to easy. So first of all, we understand the definition. 1 or 2 drugs you are using, the BP is not under control, it is uncontrolled hypertension. 3 drugs you are using, including a diuretic, optimal dose, BP not at target, resting hypertension. And if you are using 4 drugs and the BP is controlled at target, it is controlled resting hypertension. And of course, you are using 5 or more drugs, still the BP is not under control, then it is refractory hypertension. The most common 2 causes of the difficult to control hypertension is non-adherence and drug-related causes. 74% of times, it is the patient-related, it is drug-related. So if you are able to address these 2 issues, the difficult to control hypertension is no longer difficult. So we have 4 basic mechanisms which is causing resting hypertension. The volume overload is the main player in resting hypertension. Sympathetic nervous system activity is the main player in refractory hypertension. Both of them can produce arterial stiffness and endothelial dysfunction. Many disease processes like diabetes, kidney disease, drugs, inflammation, aging, obesity, OSA, aldosterone, vascular corporation can ultimately, through these 4 mechanisms, are going to produce resting hypertension. So how to make difficulty easy? C for compliance and A for alcohol and adherence. Here, the adherence is not to alcohol. Adherence is for the drug therapy. The difference between compliance and adherence is compliance, the patient is just obeying doctor's orders without his involvement. Whereas adherence is following the orders with his own interest to reduce blood pressure. So it is better to have adherence rather than compliance. First achieve compliance and then convert that into adherence. And R, don't be a reluctant physician. Try to get the target blood pressure. D for diet, which is increase in salt, diabetes mellitus. I for interfering substances like the drugs and NSAIDs. O for obstructive sleep apnea, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. And of course, L for lower limb pulses, incoactation of aorta, and peripheral vascular disease. O for other secondary causes, the most important being, we have already talked about obesity and obstructive sleep apnea, and CKD, and renal artery stenosis, and primary hyperaldosteronism. And G for good technique. The most common cause of pseudo-resistance is improper technique. So we come to cardiol up to G. So what is the 1 letter remaining? Y. What is Y for? It is U. That is white coat hypertension. So if you identify the cardiology causes and appropriately manage them, no longer you need to refer the patient to a cardiologist because you had made a hard to treat hypertension into an easy to treat hypertension. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Chennappan, for that wonderful presentation. You made really the difficulty into very easy, and you have added also COVID and the resistant hypertension. Very good. I think as usual, before we go for the panel discussion, we'll play the game Kahoot, the quiz program. Are you ready, all of you? Please download your Kahoot app, and I'll give you the PIN number. Then we can start playing. But this today we are giving only 20 seconds for each question because everybody is very, very well trained and they are doing it in 10 seconds. So Maybe next time I'll reduce to 15 seconds. So Kahoot, all of you please, and all of you will agree now that it was a wonderful talk by Chennappan. So now you have any bouncers or any tricky questions, please post them in the chat box. We have the panelists also will be happy to answer the questions. So ready to join? Now, the game pin number is 9314299. 9314299. Please download your Kahoot and then enter the game pin number. Yeah, start. I think this time you should, all of you must join. Just, try and see, play your game. But, for every meeting, whoever is playing, I am recording. And whoever is coming and then actively participating in the chat box, I have the record. So I told you in the early first class that whoever is actively attending, we will give some rewards. And of course, those who attend all the webinars, we will give them participation certificate from the medical council and also some good rewards. So it's only to motivate all of you to attend. So now 60 players have come. I think now 1 second I will start the game. Okay, ready? Now I'm going to start the game. Fine? Okay. The interactive session 7, 3, 2, 1. This is the first question for you. Difficult to control hypertension is uncontrolled hypertension, pseudo-resistant hypertension, apparent resistant hypertension, all of the above. Which is difficult to control hypertension? Though it is a difficult control hypertension, is an easy question. 53, 55, 56 answers. Very good. Oh, fantastic. 51 people have answered correctly out of 60. Then let us see the marks now. Parthasarthi 938, Glimpse 928, Rick Mighty 913. We'll go to the next question. The second question for you. Which is the most frequent complication of apparent resistant hypertension? Heart failure, ischemic heart disease, CVA, cardiac mortality. Very good. 41 have answered correctly. It is heart failure. So all of you now learned the trick. Within 15 seconds, at least 55 people have answered. Parthasarthi or Rick Mighty is now 1. Parthasarthi 3rd, Kwadai 4th, Padmashri. Now the third question for you. Pseudo-resistant hypertension causes include all except, it is a faulty technique, not faculty technique, sorry. Faulty technique, home BP monitoring, physician's inertia, non-adherence. Faculty technique is not faulty technique. Usually faculty technique is good technique, but this is faulty technique. Okay, very good. 32 has said home BP monitoring. So pseudo-resistant causes include all except home BP monitoring. Now who is the leading now? Still Rick Mighty, Kwadai, Anand, and Yusuf Ali in 5th. Now the fourth question. In white coat hypertension, HMOD is hypertension mediated organ damage, is absent. Present, I don't know. I think all of you must be correct in this. Let's see. Forty only absent. Good. White coat hypertension, HMOD is absent. Only mask hypertension, HMOD will be there. That is the difference between white coat hypertension and mask hypertension. Rick Mighty is 3679 for the second. Now, the fifth question, Osler's maneuver is done in young patient or old patient? I'm sure at least in this question, 100% should be correct. Osler's maneuver is done in young patient or old patient? Yeah, 60 have done. Very good. In 14 seconds. 55 have answered correctly. Very good. So it is all Osler's maneuver is done to rule out pseudo resistance in older patients. Now Rick Maity still leading, Quade second. Now the sixth question, which are the following groups likely to have true resistant hypertension? Son-in-law and father-in-law, daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, or A and B? You remember Chenipan was saying, which groups likely to have true resistant hypertension? I think very easy answer. I think, oh God, only 20 have answered and 5 have said son-in-law and father-in-law. Oh, poor son-in-law, poor father-in-law. Only women is at high risk. So daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. And the risk factors, women also comes as a risk factor for the difficulty hypertension. Quade 5304, Anand 5231. Now the next question. Obesity causes resistant hypertension by the following, except endothelial dysfunction, insulin resistance, increased parasympathetic activity, and leptin. You remember the drawing? That lady. Good. Except increased parasympathetic activity. Quade still leading, Anand second, Kalai. Now, the next question, 8. The duration of TV watching per day is limited to 4 hours, 2.5 hours, 3.5 hours, and 24 hours. Super, 56. So TV watching per day is only limited to 2.5 hours. Please reduce even that. Okay, now next question. Of course, Quade is leading, Anand is second, Kalai third. We'll go to the 9th question. Multi-select. Refractory hypertension is defined by using how many drugs? More than 3, more than 4, more than 5, or more than or equal to 6. Refractory hypertension. This definition, all of you would have read it in the Harrison also. Harrison was the one who said about this first. 41 has correctly answered. It's more than or equal to 5. Now, Quade still leading, Anand, Kalai. Next question, the 10th question. The most important drug in the treatment of resistant hypertension, alpha blocker, aldosterone antagonist, clonidine, beta blocker. Most persons have answered the questions in 15 seconds. I think good. 35 only answered correctly. It's aldosterone antagonist. So let us see who's the first, number 1, number 2, number 3. Kalai is third. Anand is second. The first one is Quade. Super. And Yusuf and Prince. Now we'll go to the discussion, panel discussion. Yeah, we'll stop. Now we'll go to the panelist. Dr. Najmul Hasan, please come. Najmul, come on the line. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Now, it's now open to the panel discussion. This mic up to switch. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'll go to the Najmul Hasan. Please give your opinion about the topic and your views on difficulty in hypertension.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. At first, I want to express my thanks to Dr. Murugathan for asking me to attend this important session. I also congratulate you how you arranging so many sessions, scientific and academic sessions in a very short time. I wonder actually, I am observing that during the last couple of months, you have arranged so many academic sessions. Then I am actually proud, and it is a privilege to meet all the panelists present here and all the listeners. Good evening. I want to congratulate Chenipan, Dr. Chenipan, for his wonderful presentation. Definitely hypertension and diabetes, these are two common and non-communicable disease, which is prevalent not only worldwide, it is commonly prevalent in our community, in our country also. You have mentioned that hypertension has more complications than diabetes, but diabetes, so many specialists, so many hospitals, so many centers of diabetes in our country also, but there are limited specialists and hospitals for dealing with this dreadful disease. A lot of complications we encounter from hypertension. In Bangladesh also, their prevalence is ranging in different studies from 18 to 21, roughly on an average 20. In Bangladesh Society of Medicine, they made one study that it is around 17.9. And 1/5 of the patients, the hypertension is uncontrolled. So to deal with this uncontrolled hypertension, I think three important factors to be considered. One is patient factor, one is doctors, and third is other factors or environmental factors. Definitely non-adherence and compliance, these are very important on part of patient. And doctor is also responsible for counseling of the patient. What is the fate of uncontrolled hypertension, because heart, kidney, and brain, these are the three important target organs if the pressure is uncontrolled. And many doctors are sometimes, they show inertia for counseling and selecting appropriate drugs for hypertension, and taking history and doing extensive physical examination. This is very important. And salt intake in our community is very high. Smoking is also very high. So these are the two important factors, and obesity and sleep apnea, these are the two other factors we have to be considered. Regarding resistant hypertension, renal and endocrine diseases to be considered first. One advantage in our country is that there are many drugs which are available, and this is very cheap. And a patient can consult the doctors and specialists very easily, other than Western countries. So taking appropriate history, physical examination of the patient, compliance, adherence, these are the things to be considered. And for control of hypertension, in addition to pharmacotherapy, other factors like reducing salt intake, reducing body weight, stopping smoking, and good physical exercise and balanced diet, these are the very important factors for control of hypertension. This is on my part. Thank you very much for asking me to remain panelist in this session, very important one. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazmul. Now I'll go to my friend, Dr. Lempra. Come on, your views on difficulty in hypertension, and do you get, what is the percentage of control in your country, Venezuela?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Muruganathan for inviting me to be with you tonight. And I appreciate really the invitation from the ACP Indian chapter. I would like also to congratulate Dr. Chenipan for this excellent presentation. And I think he pointed out two of the most important things to consider in evaluating people with resistant hypertension diagnosis: doctor inertia and patient inertia. And maybe the most important is doctor inertia, because doctors get used to see the patient maybe wave them a hi, hello, goodbye, and pay little attention to what the patient is doing. Second, I want to point out that the patient, we need to encourage exercise. We need to encourage low salt intake. In Venezuela, the salt intake is very high. We have a prevalence of hypertension of 24%, and half of them are well controlled or apparently well controlled. Maybe resistant hypertension may be up to 5% in selected centers. So it's not a common condition, but it's not rare either. And I think that we must put emphasis on low weight exercise and avoid salty food and increase doctors-patient relation, because patients, at least in Venezuela, try to trust very much in their cardiologist or internist. And in public centers, they try to be very close to one another. And if we take advantage of it, of this relation, we can improve patient compliance. That I think is one of the most important things to make the patient fail to reach blood pressure targets.
Okay, thank you, Lepra. Now I'll go to the questions now. For the first question, of course, maybe tomorrow we can answer, but still, shall we change labetalol on postpartum 2-month now coming with COVID pneumonia, or leave labetalol? Rajshekhar, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, sir. We can leave with labetalol. Nothing will happen. If it is mandatory, especially ACRBs, especially if postpartum is okay, peripartum is we can't. Labetalol, no problem. It is a safe beta blocker.
Okay. Chennipan, would you like to add any comment?
No, sir. What is important here is not the drug selection, it is a BP control. So if our BP is under control well with labetalol, definitely you can continue that or need not change it to AC inhibitor, because AC inhibitor or ARB neutral in COVID. It is not as if AC inhibitor ARBs are going to have a beneficial effect on COVID, but the recommendation is to continue these drugs, don't stop these drugs. And we don't start for a COVID treatment, AC inhibitor or ARB. So there is no specific indication for giving an AC inhibitor for a COVID patient, unless the patient is already on the AC inhibitor and ARB. If the patients have got a good control on labetalol, definitely it can be continued. There is no need to change it to AC inhibitor ARB because it is a COVID.
Lempira, what is the, in case of heart failure with low ejection fraction, what should be the lowest BP?
Well, that's difficult to answer, but most patients get to a systolic lower than 100, and I would say that as long as they perform all the daily activities in a reasonable way, it's fine. As long as they don't get overtired, oversleepy, or tend to have another side effects from the medication.
Okay.
I say around 100 systolic.
Okay. What are the maximum tolerated doses of common drugs? Would you like to try Lepra, or otherwise I'll ask Rajshekhar? The maximum tolerated dose for the common drugs.
Well, we are for example, here in Venezuela, doctors are usually try not to go to the highest dose available, but all studies, all trials are performed using the highest tolerable or highest drug. I would say we would push the patient to have the highest dose, and if he doesn't control, the patient doesn't have the right BP control, we can add another one. We always push to the highest dose.
Okay. Will regular or intermittent high salt intake surely cause hypertension? Regular or intermittent high salt, do you think it will lead to hypertension?
Yes,
So
high in salt. high
ahead.
salt
Yes.
intake.
Yeah,
have-
yes,
so,
Lempra. Yeah, please, Lempra, go. Yeah.
Yes. For example, in many cases, the doctor tend not to prescribe low dose diet because they think that all the people and the general public knows that every time they get diagnosed with hypertension, they should take a low dose diet. But we should emphasize, and sometimes the resistant patient with hypertension tend to be eating over salty goods, fast food, bread, salty intakes, and we should emphasize on quitting all those salty subjects.
Okay, good. The role of spirituality in refractory hypertension, sir. Chenipan?
Sir, you are the best person to answer.
Yeah, of course. When the refractory hypertension, when you give all the 5 drugs, and if you still feel the hypertension is not under control, if they are, especially in COVID times, it may be due to stress or anxiety. Yoga and meditation will definitely help, but it will not replace the drug. So this is one form of non-pharmacological treatment, but that will be good.
Yo-
Yeah. Okay.
Yoga definitely plays a vital role, sir.
Yeah.
Because
Again,
there are
yeah, yoga and the meditation, sympathetic activity will be reduced, and that is in one way scientifically proved that meditation and yoga could be useful. But of course, in the refractory hypertension, you have to start the drugs and then only try this. Only this spirituality alone may not be helpful. You must follow all the non-pharmacological lifestyle modification. As I was telling you, many people spiritually active, they take curd rice and pickle. In our country, they take curd rice and pickle many times. The pickle is the one thing, Lempra has got a lot of salt. So people are very much addicted to pickle, and they take pickle, and then that is also one of the reasons which I said. Okay. What is the drug of... Yeah. What is the drug of choice when a patient is diagnosed newly as hypertensive during COVID? Would you like to try, Lempra? In a COVID patient who is diagnosed as a hypertensive, what is the best
I
drug?
would say an ARB or an ACE inhibitor.
Okay. But the guidelines say when somebody comes with COVID, if they are not on ARB and ACE inhibitor, you don't start with ACE and ARB. But this is the guidelines. Chenipan, please stand myself corrected.
No, the COVID hypertension, so you have to be very careful in diagnosis, you see, because the COVID situation is highly variable, and various times you may have different blood pressures. So diagnosis of hypertension itself in a COVID patient is going to be difficult because it is going to be highly fluctuating. So I suggest, first of all, your diagnosis should be correct. The serial readings must have high readings. So don't go with a single reading and start a antihypertensive. The patient may crash the next 1 hour or so. So you may not be able to take out the drug and so on. So first, the diagnosis is very important. So these are all called the transient elevations of blood pressure. That should not be mistaken for hypertension. A persistent high blood pressure recorded more than 3 readings should only get a diagnosis of hypertension. So that is the first precaution you must take in a COVID patient. Single reading high blood pressure, don't give antihypertensive medicines. Of course, there is no specific drugs for a COVID hypertension, as I mentioned, but any drug is suitable for that situation. For example, that patient may have high potassium or creatinine. You cannot be exposing to ACE inhibitor ARB. The patient may have a tachycardia or wheezing. You cannot be, because of the wheezing, the patient may have a tachycardia. You cannot be exposing to a beta blocker. So the safest drug in this situation is primarily an calcium channel blocker like amlodipine, because it may not do anything bad to many of the systems, because ACE inhibitor ARB, you keep on watching your potassiums, creatinine, beta blocker, you must keep on watching the wheezing as well as the LV function. And also for the diuretic, you must watch for the output. The one drug we can give without any test, for example, a patient coming to you first, you don't have any test. The one safest drug you can start immediately will be the calcium channel blocker and amlodipine. So in this way, I will approach the patient.
Okay. And also in this juncture, Chenipan, I am very passionate about calling locked hypertension, lockdown hypertension. many people, especially during the lockdown, the pressure was under control. But during the lockdown, the pressure was not under control because of three reasons. One, they don't go out of the house to buy medicines because the medicines exhausted. Number two, without any work, without any exercise, they eat and watch television. So that is a second reason. Third most important reason, because of anxiety and neurosis and nervous depression, because of the COVID, about the profession, about the business, so they get hypertension. So that is why I coined the name as lockdown hypertension or lockdown induced hypertension, which we studied in our setup 100 people. About 60 of them who were under control, they were not under control. And 40 of them were borderline, sometimes in control, sometimes not control, because those 40 were having home blood pressure monitoring. So I used to talk to them in telemedicine with home blood pressure monitoring. I was titrating with those. So I use the term lockdown hypertension or lockdown induced hypertension. Any comment, Cheniappan, for this?
I put the slide, sir, that COVID situation can produce any type of hypertension. So I also told you the reasons for hypertension in almost 12 reasons I put it down. Yes. So definitely, sir, this type of period and this type of lot of stresses definitely convert a controlled hypertension into a resistant hypertension or uncontrolled hypertension. We have to address those issues.
Yeah, that's definitely why I coined the term lockdown hypertension. They are not the COVID patients, but normal people. But during lockdown, hypertensive patient, the hypertension was not under control. So I used that phrase, lockdown hypertension. I don't know.
The lockdown is primarily due to COVID only.
Yeah, correct. So COVID related. So I coined it as lockdown hypertension. Okay, now in case of diabetic nephropathy with hypertension with proteinuria with raised CR creatinine, what is the antihypertensive of choice?
So here we can use certain calcium channel blockers, which are likely to have some effect on the protein excretion, especially benidipine we can use here because this drug will control the pressure and have some impact on the protein excretion, or cilnidipine if your pressure is you are able to control with the cilnidipine. So these are the two drugs which are acting on the N channels and T channels. I've got a significant role on the protein excretion. So I'll select these drugs. Then, of course, for controlling pressure, if the creatinine is high, you can always have the option of selecting an alpha blocker if the patient has got a prostate, or a clonidine, or if it's very resistant hypertension, or if the patient has got associated coronary disease, a beta blocker, especially metoprolol, which is not renally cleared. So depending upon the other situations, we can select. If you want to address the issue of a proteinuria plus the hypertension and chronic kidney disease, where the ACE inhibitor and ARBs are not tolerated, then naturally the drugs are likely to be the calcium channel blockers, the other calcium channel blockers, which are not only acting on the L channel, but also acting on the T and N channels.
Lempra, do you have benidipine in your country?
Yes, we do. And we use them a lot.
Use them a lot? Okay. Because this drug came recently, about 2 years back, to India. So which calcium channel blocker you use more?
Amlodipine. Here in Venezuela, amlodipine. And second, the GIT formulation of nifedipine.
Okay, good. Okay. Now another question: diuretics safely used in diabetes? Your comment? Diuretics safely can be used in diabetes?
We prefer to use indapamide, sir. Indapamide is metabolically neutral. So the one drug we can use in diabetes may be indapamide, thiazide-like diuretic.
Okay. There any role for direct renin inhibitor aliskiren in resistant hypertension?
We never mentioned that, sir. That is gone out of the picture. Yes. So it has increased cardiovascular risk and mortality. So it's no longer prescribed.
I think aliskiren is withdrawn from the market because
that altitude trial, no, Cheniappan, altitude trial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think a few more questions from my side. For obstructive sleep apnea, is there any role for CPAP in reducing hypertension, Cheniappan?
Yes, definitely. There are certain reports which have said there is definitely the resistant hypertension. In resistant hypertension, if your AHI is more than 5, definitely the CPAP are better tolerable is BiPAP actually. Rather than CPAP, the BiPAP is better tolerable. So this definitely reduces the pressure and also improves the quality of life of the patient. So for example, this gives you better quality of the patient with all the symptoms I told you, where the patient has got daytime sleepiness and so on. So the increase in the quality of life itself has got a significant impact on reduction of blood pressure.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Now we are coming almost to the end of the session. Now, before we wind up, Lempra, 1 or 2 points, the drive home message for all the attendees. What is your advice on the difficulty in hypertension? Your message, one message.
Okay. First, make sure it is real resistant hypertension and keep an eye on doctor inertia.
Very good. Najmul?
Yes. I will tell that on part of the doctors, good history and physical examination is very important, and counseling of the patient, particularly adherence and compliance regarding drugs selection is very important. And on the part of the patient, they have to take the right drug in right dose and right time. In addition to drugs, medication, other lifestyle modification which has been said this to be followed. This is about hypertension and particularly resistant hypertension.
Lempra, before I wind up, do you use artificial intelligence in the treatment of hypertension?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
Okay. Your comment, Rajshekhar?
Sir, in resistant hypertension, though we use the third drug as a diuretic, thiazide or chlorthalidone, we can add the fourth drug, as Chennappan pointed out, that is spironolactone. That is 2018, Sabine Hook has released an article that is the panaxin 1 channels that it inhibited by spironolactone, that is in turn being inhibited by alpha adrenergic stimulation, in turn ATP release. So spironolactone is also a mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist. It can be added as a fourth drug to inhibit panaxin 1 channels, which is abundant in smooth muscles. That is the point I want to add.
Okay. Chennappan, final word from you.
Final word from me to remember my final side of cardiology. So if you remember cardiology and address all these issues, you will become a cardiologist.
Well, that's very good, Chennappan. I think today we had a very good discussion on difficulty in treating hypertension. And I'm very happy to see so many professors are participating. Dr. Sangram Bradar from Gulbarga, Dr. Anand Bakshi, cardiologist from Calcutta, Dr. M.K. Roy from West Bengal. So many professors, Dr. Mohan from Tirunelveli. So I'm very happy. I'm overwhelmed by a lot of professors are attending the webinar. That shows how effective our Chennappan's teaching. In fact, Vidit Kandalwal said during this COVID time, it's really refreshing to learn more about hypertension. Our Thangavelu from our Tirupur also was praising, and there so many appreciations have come. Ravindra Bihar, he says very good CME, and then so many people have really appreciated. Thank you all for your support and cooperation. And tomorrow we'll meet. I request all of you, if you have somebody who's related to you, who's an obstetrician, please ask them to join. Tomorrow is the hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. And if you are family members or obstetrician, please give the link, ask them to join. And don't forget, whatever questions you ask, you can always put it in the hypertension hits, it will be answered. So Lempra, I will include you in our hypertension hits. You please join in our WhatsApp and you can be,
Yes,
happy.
I will join.
Yeah. And also Najmul, you can
Yes.
also join our WhatsApp group, Najmul, and whenever you find time, you can answer questions and you can also post questions.
Okay,
So we have
thank
got
you. Thank you.
3 hypertension hits WhatsApp group, 2 groups of ECG, and 2 groups of clinical imaging. So all of them are full. So we do daily activity, and our WhatsApp professor Rajshekhar will lead the all the WhatsApp groups. So, and I also congratulate Rajshekhar, who was conferred FRCP Ireland day before yesterday. Congratulations, Rajshekhar, on behalf of all the attendees and the panelists. My hearty congratulations for you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Congratulations, Professor Dr.
Congratulations, sir. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chandra.
Congratulations and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much. Okay, good night. In our way of saying namaste, say it namaste.
Namaste.
No handshaking. No handshaking.
Namaste.
Namaste. Yes, that's right. Okay, Chenipan, thank you, Chenipan. Good night. Good
Thank
night,
you,
all of
thank
you.
you,
Good night.
thank you.
Good night. Good
Thank you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Murugathan and Rajashekar. Nice
Good
to
night.
see you. Nice
good
to
night.
see you.
Good night. Good night.
Nice to have met you all.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Recording.